Well, hey, Belmont friends. This is Dave from the Counseling Center. It's good to have you all with us today. And I'm really excited today to have someone with us who's been with us numerous times on campus through different convocation opportunities through the years. And for those of you who don't know Lauren Martin, who you can see on the screen, she also is someone who does a lot of consulting with our staff team on certain cases through each year and times that we have some questions. And so she's not only been a resource for y'all and a great speaker and someone who's shared some wonderful stuff with you, but she's been a great resource for us. And so a couple weeks ago, a week ago or so, she had seen some of the videos we'd been making and offered to connect with us. And so what we're going to do is turn this conversation into a convocation. And so Lauren, do you want to introduce yourself real quick and say hey to everyone?
I'm going to start calling myself the convo queen. I'm
Yes.
just kidding.
Yes.
Self-proclaimed convo queen. I have so much fun coming to convos. I call myself that just because I'm obsessed with coming to them. Maybe it's because I don't have to be there for school credit. So I think they're fun. But yeah, I'm Lauren, a licensed professional counselor in Franklin, primarily see chronic depression, eating disorders, anxiety, and then more acute stuff like suicidality, self-harm, that sort of stuff.
Yeah. So Lauren, tell us about some of the topics you've done for Convo in the past for us.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I mean, I've talked about friendships and kind of knowing where your relationships are and where they want to go and how to start building relationships. We've done a few talks on values and how to incorporate values to being more of like your guidance and decision making, as opposed to like your shoulds or what your mama said, unless what your mama said is your value. And then we talked about wise mind last time. We've done some convos on self-harm and just, how to become more aware of it if that's something you're struggling with, or if you have a friend that's struggling with it. I think that covers like most of it. It's usually skills based because a lot of the modalities that I work from, or a lot of things that I do, like radically open DBT, are going to have a skills component to it.
Sure.
I love skills. Everybody needs skills.
Yeah, absolutely. So Lauren, before we dive in, a fun question. Have you been binging anything on Netflix through this thing? Have you done Tiger King yet?
I've not. So I've not done Tiger King. I am a big Bravo person, and so the Real Housewives of New York started.
Okay.
And so that's been going on. Vanderpump Rules is still in effect.
Okay.
Beverly Hills starts in a few weeks, but the gem of them all, Real Housewives of Potomac, starts in May.
Okay.
And I am waiting for it. But I've actually been binging a lot more like podcasts.
Yeah.
And if anything is really binging in my house, it's Disney for my child, so that I can like be sane. Yeah. But yeah, that's my binging.
Well, those sound good. Yeah, it's been quite a season. And so Lauren, maybe to kick it off today, I know we're going to chat a little bit, but I'd love to kind of kick it to you first here. Tell us just a little bit about kind of what you've seen in terms of like how you've been dealing with clients and what's been popping up during this kind of crazy season, like once in a lifetime experience that we have. Like, what's it been like? What have you been noticing? Any themes, any things popping up regularly with clients?
Yeah, so a common theme is that the pressure is off.
Okay.
So the pressure is off because everybody's life is somewhat put on hold. So like these goals and, well, you should be doing this or you should be getting out more. A lot of that pressure is off. And I think what's cool about it is that you kind of get to reevaluate, like, okay, and this has been for me personally too, what's motivating my day-to-day sort of decision making.
Sure.
And so it's almost like a reevaluation of values. And so for those of my clients that are, on the depression, anxiety sort of realm, those that are more depressed and isolating are like, yes, like I'm saving the world with my self-isolation lifestyle, like go me. And then those of my clients that are anxious that are like, yeah, now everybody understands like what the heck's going on in my brain and like so it's more like a validating
Sure.
experience. But then I think also with that relief, and this is like the weird sort of balance I'm trying to strike right now, is not pushing that whole, hey, this is quarantine time, make sure you get something done. Like,
Mhm.
I don't want to push the hustle with it. And
Yeah.
at the same time, I think for a lot of us, we're really struggling on, since there's no certainty
Mhm.
as to what post pandemic life's going to look like,
Yeah.
how do we begin having some momentum and movement?
Mhm.
And if you're somebody that struggles with depression, you know that momentum is essential
Yeah.
for like, even if you're resting, you got to have consistent intermittent rest instead of doing all the things and then none of the things.
Yeah.
So I think momentum's like a big theme,
Sure.
momentum and values. Like, what's been driving me, what needs to drive me now,
Yeah.
and how do I have a sense of a sense of momentum, even if what's going on right now is so not normal.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell me more about that. Like, tell me about, sometimes I think you're totally right with sometimes the pressure feeling like it's off in certain senses. Talk about, like, for some of the people, like, I know we've had a lot of students who feel like pressure is changed into new ways of, like, now I have to do online classes, which are totally new. And, like, or
Yeah.
now I'm graduating and the job market's different. And so, like, it's interesting because it's
Yeah.
almost like there's this, like, side that feels like pressure is off, and then there's a side that feels like pressure has, like, totally escalated.
Yeah. Well, I think it's if you think about it, it's kind of like grieving about expectations,
Mhm.
you know, because so, and this may go with some of the mixed messages that we're getting about how to deal with this pandemic, in
Sure.
the sense of, I graduated undergrad right as the recession hit.
Right.
And that was in '08.
Yeah.
I luckily got a job, but it really challenged this notion, because it wasn't a full-time job from the start. Like, there
Mhm.
was this season of time where I was doing a career-based job part-time,
Yeah.
like in the field that I wanted to be in. But then I was also working, scanning people into a gym,
Sure.
and that it was sort of that kind of balance.
Yeah.
And I think it was hard for me to do that. I think since I was working a job in the field that I liked, I didn't have as much shame
Yeah.
around doing the kind of like, you know, more not career based job.
Yeah.
Because up until that point, the culture, like, if you're like, the culture in general is like, you graduate, you get your degree, and then you start your career, which we all
Sure.
know. You and I both know, because we're, past it, that sort
Mhm.
of BS.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, for those that are graduating now, that pressure is still there, because if you think about it, all of us as teachers, um, even therapists, are like, hey, you're about to graduate and now you get to do this next step.
Mhm.
And I think
Mhm.
that we all unknowingly put some pressure around what that next step has to look like.
Yeah.
Like, it has to look like your first job where you take your box set of stuff and you put it down and you post your pictures, and that's great. And it doesn't have to look like that. Like, we don't have to marry ourselves to one career. We don't have to marry ourselves to how it looks like.
Yeah.
And if that's what you wanted,
Yeah.
then you got to grieve that too.
Mhm. Can you talk to us a little bit about, it's interesting that you said the word, like, grieving. And so can you tell us a
Yes.
little bit about the kind of, like, what you're noticing or what maybe that's looking like for people right now?
Well, just like we would have like the death, or how we would grieve the death of a loved one,
Mhm.
like, grief is not one size fits all.
Yeah.
But I think it's and Brene Brown actually did a really good podcast recently on it. I forget, I think it's about comparative suffering. But it's really easy with where we are, like, just us as people,
Sure.
to look at the people that have it worse than us
Yeah.
and use that to minimize the feelings that we're having right now.
Right.
Um, and instead, we have to recognize both ends of the spectrum, that there's always somebody that's doing worse than us, and there's always
Mhm.
somebody that's doing better than us in some sort of way.
Mhm.
And I like the fact that culture now wants us to be more aware and
Yeah.
woke, as you would say. I
Sure.
sounded so ridiculous saying that. But, like, it's good to have awareness that, like, hey, if I'm complaining about the stress of
Mhm.
working from home, yeah, it's good that I'm working from home. I have an income. Like,
Yeah.
that's awesome. and it's still stressful. So I
Sure.
think with this idea of grief, the what I feel like people are struggling with is that idea of, can I even validate this?
Yeah.
And that's what grieving truly is. It's like, okay, this is how I'm feeling right now. I'm not going to make excuses for it.
Hmm.
I'm just going to let it be. It's
Hmm.
probably going to be messy. It's probably not going to be cute.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
probably going to cope with it. The idea is to not cope with it in like a really crappy way.
Hmm.
Um, but it's also to not totally ignore it. And I
Right.
think for those that are graduating, it's like, it sucks. Like, you might
Hmm.
not get to walk the stage at the time that you thought you were going
Hmm.
to,
Yeah.
or if you may not, like, you're not going to get to experience that last class, like where if you've been in the same program with people where you get to like hug them,
Hmm.
you don't get to if you're in an organization and you have like end of year banquets, like
Hmm.
all of that stuff is gone. And in the grand scheme of life, you might not be that bent out of shape about it, but right now in your bubble, that's so important.
Yeah.
And there's
Sure.
nothing wrong with being in a bubble. I think that we totally forget that.
Hmm.
And I think that's what's kind of cool about the pandemic, is that it is bringing us back to our own bubble, to recognize like that's what matters. That
Yeah.
that's what matters first. It's okay to expand it and to be aware of what's going on around it, but it doesn't mean that you don't tend to
Sure.
your own stuff.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, and it's interesting. I've had a few interactions with people, well, not a few, multiple interactions with
Mm-hmm.
people, and it's interesting. It's almost like the experience that they're having is like a CPU with like these background apps that are just running all the time right now,
Yeah.
and so they're like, they're like thinking about the future and the job market and graduation, or like finishing the semester, and am I going to have a job this summer? Did my internship get canceled? Did my what's this going to be like in the future? Like, how is the market going
Mm-hmm.
to come back? Are people around me healthy? Like, all these really important questions are kind of just back there, and it's almost like we have this kind of this like low speed, consistent experience of trauma that we're experiencing
Oh
right now,
yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and then you like pair that with like the grieving process, and like I think a lot of people are just saying like, I'm just so worn out, I'm just really
Mm-hmm.
tired, I'm really lacking motivation, it's hard to get up and going for anything, and they're kind of wondering why. And it's almost like, well, when your CPU has like all those background apps running all the time, it's like it's so mentally exhausting, and like
Yeah.
takes its toll on you.
And what's hard is that for some of us, where we are, it goes back to that whole deal that this will probably be the only time ever in our life that we're globally experiencing the same thing at once,
Sure.
which is cool because it's like, well, hey, where you're grieving, I'm also grieving too. It just looks very different.
Yeah.
But we all kind of like that common cause, which is neat.
Hmm.
What I think is hard is um, it like where there is everybody's kind of having that lag,
Hmm.
there's still room for comparisons,
Hmm.
because one thing that I've felt, at least in my personal experience, has been like when I was at Target, like before all this was happening, and I was
Yeah.
getting stuff and it was quiet and it just felt weird. And I was like, I feel like I'm preparing for a hurricane
Sure.
that I'll never feel.
Yeah.
Because, like, God willing, I don't get the coronavirus. Like, I'll never
Yeah.
feel that impact. I
Yeah.
may feel it in different ways, but when you see
Hmm.
what's going on, and then we have to think about what taking in that information feels like.
Hmm.
And for if we think about the idea of vicarious trauma, or even the idea of just witnessing it,
Hmm.
and we can't do it, like we can't intervene.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I can't go to the hospital and save people. And then
Mhm.
those people that are, they're experiencing a whole other level of stuff.
Yeah.
And so there's different variances and levels to it. And we're all trying to make sense of something that doesn't have a one, there's no book out
Yeah.
there of how to handle a pandemic. But two, like it's so different for all of us.
Mhm. Mhm.
And yes, that could be said about life, but I think that's what's exhausting too, is just trying to make sense of, because our day to day is being totally rocked.
Right.
Even something as simple, I was trying to order Chinese food last night, and
Mhm.
half of the restaurants were closed, and that's such like a minor problem. But
Mhm.
the devastation that came with that for me, because then I felt so bad for the restaurants that had to
Mhm.
close, and then we had to call like 3 or 4 different restaurants.
Yeah.
And it's like, even that sort of like ease of like, we always go to this one place,
Mhm. Mhm.
it's delicious, it's consistent,
Mhm. Yeah.
So then we get the other place and it was okay, but it's like there's zero consistency.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So tell me about for you, I know that you just said there's no book for this, but tell me about for you, like when we're in this state where we're getting exposed to this all the time and everything's kind of slowly like just kind of hitting us in different levels. Like talk to me about how we not necessarily what do they call it? Like I've heard people saying like they're crushing their quarantine and stuff, but like how do we like actually like in a sense like try to do our best to take care of ourselves in a situation like this, you know?
Sorry, I just had like this voice in my ear that's a crusher quarantine.
Exactly. It's kind of, yeah, it's kind of a gym more metaphor, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
um the big thing that I've kind of been reflecting on for myself, and I think it fits in line with the kind of just like my perspective as a therapist, is getting real about your own expectations and letting those just be yours and you matching whatever expectation works for you.
Yeah.
This is the time to be skillfully selfish.
Sure.
So like the way to crush your quarantine is like you define what crushing your quarantine looks like.
Mm-hmm.
For some people it is about finally doing projects that they've been putting off.
Mm-hmm.
For some people it is they're having to resume their daily life like nothing's changed, even though everything has changed for them too.
Yeah.
So for some people it's just survival. For some people it's finally addressing things that have been on the back burner.
Mm-hmm.
For some people, like it is about getting healthy and living their best life.
Yeah.
And what we don't want to do is take on shame either by comparing and
Sure.
seeing like where you're doing something wrong, but we also don't want to shame the person that like I'm a mom now, and so the idea of like the moms that have like the chalkboard schedule and like we're
Mm-hmm.
limiting screen time, and I'm like, Disney and like Pete the Cat on
Mm-hmm.
YouTube, like those are like Hank's living it up
Yeah.
right now. And so I think that's essentially, I feel
Yeah.
like that's the most important thing, because then it lays a foundation.
Mm-hmm.
Some days I'm not going to get jack squat done,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not going to wear real pants for like half of this. I'm
Yeah.
wearing yoga pants the whole time. You want to know why? Because like when this is all said and done, I'm going to have to wear real pants again, and I'm going to be really mad at myself for not like
Yeah.
living it up and wearing some fuzzy socks every day during this. But that's my quarantine. So I'm gonna do me.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's so interesting. I think that there has been, it's hard because I think we've all processed this different, and there isn't a right or wrong way to do it. And there are a lot of messages out there about like, well, this is your chance to do these things. And I think for me, I was talking with someone the other night, and we were talking about just the idea of like, what is it like to just sit into the emotions that you're feeling, and like, I mean, I'm almost like, we talked a little bit about like this idea of like, I wonder if your body is really telling you kind of what some of your needs are right now. And I wonder if it's, if like that sadness, is like your body feeling like it needs to really grieve for a little bit, or the like anger is like your body's way of saying like, I'm like really frustrated. And to me, what's been fascinating is I think so many people are feeling those emotions, and they're feeling like maybe there's something wrong with them for feeling it, or like, why can't they get motivated and stuff. And what I'm thinking on the flip side of the screen, and obviously it's always harder to offer it to ourselves than it is to offer it to someone else, is just like, man, those are such normal feelings in this, right? Like body is like right where it's supposed to be, and you're processing, if you weren't feeling that right now, I'd be more concerned about you than the fact that you are feeling that right now, and how do we give ourselves permission and space to say that like, oh wow, my body is telling me something really important right now, like in a sense.
And I think that's why, like, so a lot of therapists and, just medical providers are really promoting just the simple basics. Like, if there is anything that would be helpful to maintain in this, it's sleep, movement, and just general, balanced eating. And all of that stuff sounds so stereotypical, but they're stereotypical for a reason. Like if you're taking meds, keep taking your meds, even if it's like a lot of times those students that have ADHD, and again, you got to consult your doctor, but like email your doctor and say, hey, what makes sense to do this? But For some people think, oh, well, since I'm not going to class, like I'm just
Mhm.
doing online stuff, I don't need to take my ADHD meds. But for some people that can impact their mood,
Sure.
because if you're in one spot and
Mhm.
all the things are there and you can't stay focused, like that might be needed. So just email your doctor and check with them about what makes sense, for
Mhm.
your meds while this is going on. I'm not saying have like a rigid sleep schedule. Like if you
Mhm.
stay up late one night, that okay, you stay up one night, but being aware of like what habits are being established. Same thing with eating. Like for those that have eating disorders, like going to the store is even more of a pain in the butt than it was
Yeah.
before. And so it's like you got to take care of that, because if you don't have the foundation,
Sure.
it's almost like that hierarchy of needs. If your basic physiological needs aren't being met,
Mhm.
and if we're in a constant state of uncertainty and flux,
Yeah.
and our nervous systems are reacting to
Yeah.
that, like
Yep.
I've been baking so much. Oh my gosh. I made zucchini bread for the first time.
Yeah.
That's delicious.
Uh-huh.
Banana bread is like the jam. And I say that I've been baking, like I basically like go and stir while
Yeah.
Henry is like making it, but it's
Yeah.
fine. I help.
Yeah. So let's move in a direction of let's start chatting about some things that are helpful. But one of the things I think about a little bit, and I've been talking about with a lot of clients lately, is just this idea that sometimes there's like the part of it where we need to pay attention to our hard emotions, right? Like they need some
Yeah.
time to do the work that needs to happen to process it. Can you talk a little bit about how we would tell the difference between a time where our bodies like really need to process something and need to have like some sort of time spent with a hard emotion, and when
Yeah.
maybe we're stuck in a really bad loop that's actually not helpful, and we need to like and we need to maybe do something that's going to like get us out of that instead. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think you just said the key word. I think it's the idea of stuck.
Hmm.
Like if there's no movement going on. So if you're in the midst of a hard emotion and you find yourself just being very consumed in it,
Hmm.
to where it's all encompassing, to where you're not getting any movement of like just basic self-care, basic sort of maintenance of your life.
Hmm.
There's a difference between being mindful and saying, you know what, for the next little bit, I'm gonna finally just let myself kind of go
Hmm.
and be and grieve and be in a hard spot and kind of tackle the things that I've been avoiding now that I have the space. That makes sense if you're not achieving everything that you normally do,
Yeah.
but you are maintaining your basic needs.
Hmm.
I feel like there's nothing wrong with that.
Hmm.
Um, but it's that keyword of stuck. Like, am I stuck in this, or am I truly processing it?
Hmm.
Because you know, with with clients, or with like as a clinician and as a human,
Yeah.
there's a difference between being so distracted that you don't experience anything that goes by.
Hmm.
But what we're looking for is variability in our day. So we're not looking to be all high and happy all the time, or all low and flat. The idea is to bring the highs and the lows more to a median range,
Right. Right.
and then within our whole day have some variability with our mood, not like
Hmm.
this, but like a steady sort of like, I woke up and I was grumpy, and then I had breakfast and I felt a little bit better, and then I watched the news and that kind of made my mood dip down, but I did this and I'm feeling a little bit better.
Hmm.
It's variability. So I feel like if you're just feeling a lot of the same, like
Sure.
if you're feeling happy go lucky this whole time,
Hmm.
maybe there's a chance you're ignoring something.
Hmm.
If you're feeling super flat and depressed, then maybe you're not acknowledging the other
Hmm.
side of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just like the idea of variability and not being stuck.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
I get curious too about like even knowing that like there is variability in this, right? Like there's so much variability in this, and like one of the things I've been talking a lot about with clients, and even just in the videos that we've been making on campus, is just this idea of like self-compassion in these times. And I think
yeah,
I think oftentimes what we do is when we get in a space that we don't like, or that is hard, what we try to do to ourselves is be like, you should get motivated, or like we should on ourselves a lot, right? Like you should figure this
yeah,
out, and like like, don't let this overtake you, or don't be, don't be consumed by this or whatever. And I think what we find oftentimes talking about variability is we find that like someone comes in and is having kind of a normal day, and they have something like that happen in their heart of hearts. What they're really trying to do is find motivation, or find a better mood, or find
Yeah.
just something to kind of lift whatever it is that's kind of hit really hard. And what we do when we get really critical with ourselves, even though it's motivated by a part of us that wants to get better, what we find is that it actually like clicks us down a notch, and like
Absolutely.
puts us in this space where like it's almost like depressive symptoms, right? Like we feel a lot of lethargy, we feel a lot of like hopelessness and stuckness, and it's like we were moving along and now we're just further down in that pit, and it's even harder to get
Yeah.
to the place that we've been wanting to go. And so I think it's sometimes it's fascinating how like unconsciously we have a pure motivation that can take us to a place that actually makes it harder to get to where our motivation is wanting to
Mm-hmm.
go. And we've been talking
Mm-hmm.
a lot about just self-compassion and what it looks like to kind of say in those moments, like, wow, like my body's feeling something right now that must be really important, and like, and this
Yeah.
is really hard. And and so like, what if I give myself some space for this just to be hard for a minute? Or like, if I am
Yeah.
tired, what if I like set my watch for 5 or 10 minutes and just close my eyes and really like just try to do that, and then see how we're feeling at that point, um
Yeah.
I do wonder sometimes, what we find oftentimes is when we can allow our emotions and we can process through them in those hard things, what we find is it actually lifts us up, and we do actually
Mm-hmm.
sometimes find that we can like charge out of that with some sense of like a little bit more motivation, or heading in the direction that we want to.
Yeah, like what you're talking about is the idea of openness, because what we don't want to do is attach meaning to being sad or angry or low, and we don't want to attach meaning to being high. So it's like, like I'm feeling a little tired right now. How about that?
Yeah.
Like, like what am I going to do about it?
Yeah.
Like I can lay down and take a nap. That actually happened to me last week. I finally had some free time,
Hmm.
and I was like, I should do something with this free time,
Hmm.
and my body was just tired, and I was like, okay, I could either lay down and take a nap and make myself feel like crap the whole time
Hmm.
while I take this nap, or I could just take this nap
Hmm.
and not wake up feeling worse, or like not wake up feeling worse because I was beating myself up the whole time.
Yeah.
And so it is that idea of self-compassion. This is like, okay, I'm tired.
Yeah.
Like where did I get the idea that it's wrong to be tired, or that it's wrong to take a nap in the middle
Yeah.
of the day?
Yeah.
And even when I like go back to my office, I might even think about that too.
Hmm.
I've never napped in my office, and I've seen people like therapists talking about taking naps and between clients. I'm like, you do that?
Yeah.
Like that sounds fun. Like I might just be like I might just like adopt napping into my
Yeah.
post pandemic life.
Yeah. What a
You
concept,
know,
right? Yeah.
what a concept of like being nice to myself, and if I'm tired, like actually honoring that. Like what?
Yeah.
Who would have thunk it?
Yeah. I mean, and it sounds like I do wonder, like, and this is where maybe like we can start heading in that positive direction. But I do wonder sometimes, like, and I don't want to blow sunshine and butterflies at the pandemic right now, but like, I do think that some positive um, discoveries are coming out of like a season like this, and like,
Absolutely.
I think that when we've had a little bit more space to pay attention to our bodies and know what we really need, the amount of rest that we need, or like that we get maybe more time with our loved ones or whatever, like we're starting to see maybe a different set of like priorities and a different set of values start to
Hmm.
emerge, or maybe even a set of values that was just kind of hidden underneath a really busy schedule.
Yeah, and that's like where we don't the skill which comes from standard DBT is called making meaning, and so it's not silver lining isn't meant to dismiss the bad. And I think that's like where concepts
Right.
like gratitude, concepts like looking at the silver lining, I think they get a bad rep because
Yeah.
it's not meant to invalidate the pain.
Hmm.
It's about holding both simultaneously. And I think that's a thing that a lot of us have to struggle with, because holding both at the same time is not certain.
Sure.
Being really engrossed in the crap is really certain, and being really engrossed in the sunshine and rainbows,
Yeah.
that's certain. But when you hold both together,
Yeah.
that that's life. And so if being in this quarantine pandemic situation, whatever it looks like for you,
Yeah.
if you're learning lessons from it, awesome.
Hmm.
If you're not, then this just wasn't the time for you to have to learn anything.
Yeah.
Like it's and if it really rocked your world, and like you're cleaning up a big mess about it for a while, then
Hmm.
like that's just as valid as somebody that has this epiphany that they need to like reshape their values.
Yeah.
Um, but
Yeah.
like
It's,
it does happen.
yeah. I mean, and I think what you're talking about too at its core is a lot of mindfulness too, right? Which is like,
Oh, absolutely.
to me, I think a lot about mindfulness just being, I'll tell you a story that is always an interesting one. But when I think of mindfulness, what I think of is this story. But um, about 7 years ago, I was working this job in Jackson, Mississippi, and we were doing some old civil rights history stuff, and I was working with this person who was a number of years younger than me and lived in
Mhm.
California, and I just thought she was cool. I thought she was fun, and I thought she was interesting and smart, and but I didn't think much more of it. And then after we worked together, she was on staff. I was full time, but she was there just for a summer thing, and she went back to California. And I kept kind of thinking about her. We'd email every once in a while, and by the time like Christmas came around that year, I was like, man, I just can't like shake this like interaction that I had with this person over the summer. And I was talking to my mom, and she's like, hey, you get one shot at life, so whatever you do, like reach out to her, don't, but like just don't regret it, whatever you do. And so
Yeah. Go
um
mom.
so I came back to Tennessee after that break, and I sent her, this girl, a message, and I just said, hey, I know that we live thousands of miles apart, and I know that um I know that like we're years apart, and this is like just a kind of a long shot in the dark, but would you ever be interested in intentionally chatting a bit more? And she didn't respond for a week, and so that
Oh
was hard. And when she responded, I almost wish that she hadn't, because I got like not just like a rejection, but like a like a what were you thinking kind of like email.
yeah.
And I mean, I was just crushed. I labeled that as like so bad, right? And it felt bad.
Mhm.
It did. I mean, nobody in that time would have
Yeah.
been like, "Oh, Dave, this isn't so bad." It was like it just sucked,
Mhm.
And for four
Absolutely.
months, I really did. I lived in that space of like, this is awful, like this is terrible, right? And I had no vision outside of that.
Mhm.
And 4 months later, I got a call from my office, and they said, "Hey, this summer you're going to be like the direct supervisor of 3 people," and she was one of the 3. And I was like, if it was bad at Christmas time, like this is worse. Like now I have to like, the last interaction we've had was whatever, and now I have to like work with her every day. I have to do her one-on-ones. Like I have
Yeah.
to like supervise this person, and I was like, this is even worse. And I worked with that person for the next 3 months and tried to figure out how to like keep my distance and respect that person's wishes and try to
Mhm.
whatever. And I remember the last day of that summer, we kind of made it through, and I was breathing like a little bit of a sigh of relief of like, I don't have to be in this horribly awkward situation anymore. And I'd found out that she had gotten a job in like San Francisco, and I said, hey, I've got a little budget left on my card, and it's the last day of summer, and our company is really strict with money. I was like, let's go get lunch, and we can celebrate just making it through this. And so
Yeah.
went and had lunch, and then after that, I had to head to like Chattanooga from Mississippi. And I got in my car and I started driving, and like 15 minutes after I left there, I got a phone call, and it was her. And usually to me, when I get a call from someone after I've been with them, it was like an emergency, usually like
Yeah.
someone had died or something. And so I was expecting the worst, and she was kind of like nervous on the other line, and she asked if like that offer from last January was still on the table. And I look back, and now that person has been my wife for 3 years, and and we bought a house together and have a dog, and like my world is kind of like shook up by the fact that for 8 months of my life I looked at interactions with her as like the worst thing that could possibly be happening, and I labeled them as so bad. And what's really interesting
Yeah.
to me is, even though they were bad and they weren't fun and nobody would ever tell me that they were,
That
um
sounds awful. My
also
like my stomach hurts for you.
yeah. But like what's crazy is like, also, I think right now, if I asked you if like me sending that email in December of that year was like a good or bad decision in the trajectory of my life, you'd probably say that it was maybe one of the best decisions I made.
Yeah.
And if I asked you about that phone call when I found out I had to be your boss for 3 months, and like talk to her every day, if you would say, was that horrible or bad, or was that like a really fortunate and like serendipitous opportunity, you'd probably say it was
Yeah.
the latter, right? And I think that sometimes we look at things, and like you said, I think you did a beautiful job of saying that. It's like mindfulness to me says like we can't label things as good or bad fully, because we don't know yet. Like, we don't know what change this brings. And sure, there are parts of it that are hard, and they're supposed to be hard, and they're not supposed to be good, and we shouldn't blow
Right.
sunshine and butterflies at it. But there's like this broader narrative that plays out, and it takes time to develop. And that's really hard to sit in, the tension of all that. Cause I think what you were describing more than anything there was just like, mindfulness is sitting in tension, right? Like, and
Mm-hmm.
not having all the information yet. And that's what's so hard about this.
That's what new learning is. We don't know, and the only way that we can know is to learn. And I think if we give ourselves permission to learn, or just to kind of like not have all the answers, we allow things to naturally fall in place. And then even for us, it actually helps decrease the amount of mental marathoning that we're doing too, especially in a time like this. It's like, okay, like, it's like if you're going to try to find toilet paper, you can get caught up in the fact that you had to go to 10 stores to find toilet paper, or you can just be like, okay, I got toilet paper. It took a lot of work. I still have my toilet paper.
Yep. Yeah.
And it's both annoying and it got done.
Totally. So Lauren, before we finish up, I want to be mindful of time. We got a couple minutes left, and I've still got a lot I would love to ask you. Number one, tell us about your practice. Tell us about if you're taking clients. Tell us about just any of that stuff.
Yeah. So my practice is called Novel Counseling. It's in Franklin, but right now it's online. I'm on a wait list for individual. If you have a therapist and you want to do the skills class, the adult skills class, I'm going to start accepting new members probably towards the end of May. It just depends on if we're online or in person. But if you just email me, you can go to my website, novelcounseling.com, and just, shoot me a message with what's going on. And then if I can't see you, I'll be able to connect you with like other therapists that are like-minded. And then I also try to make a lot of content that can just be like a resource for you. So Instagram has, I post content daily. I have a podcast called A Novel Life. It's on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And then I just started doing TikTok. And it's more meant for fun as opposed to, educational. But like if you're on TikTok, that's kind of fun too. So you might get some therapist knowledge thrown your way in the most absurd way possible.
Of course. So Lauren, just to wrap today, do you have any thoughts you'd share with? So we've got a bunch of students whose year is just ending very different than they thought, and their year, by the time we put this up, they probably have like 2 weeks left. And any thoughts for them, or transitioning seniors whose graduation isn't what they seem like? Any thoughts you'd leave us with in the end of all this?
I'm not a hugger, but I want to give everybody a hug. Maybe I'll start hugging after the pandemic. But I think like it sucks. And so I think just like recognizing like, yeah, it's not the end of the world, and it still sucks a lot. Like I don't have any good words, because it's like, it just is.
Yeah.
And so I think, just being able to sit with that and know like it isn't going to be what you expected, and that's okay.
Right.
And you can get creative with how you recoup for it, and it still won't be the same as what you thought it would be.
Right. Lauren, I just want to share this with you because I got a kick out of this the other day, but it says, to my friends saying that they can't wait to hug everyone when this thing ends, it says, it's backwards in there, but it says, I didn't hug you before this started, and I'm not hugging you after.
I mean,
I thought that was hilarious.
The actual hugs don't get to me. It's when the hugs linger, and I'm like, you're holding me.
Oh, I know. It's like, for those of you who are tuning in and are not pursuing therapy, we get pretty heavily trained to not like touch clients, and like and so as therapists, it's almost like traumatic for us when someone like comes in for a hug, because we're like, how do I respect the client and also like not give them a hug? And it's like every therapist, if you ever want to ask them and get a funny story out of them, just ask it like when a client has tried to like break a physical boundary with like giving a hug or something.
Yes, like it's never good. It's never. It's like that. Okay.
Yeah. And you're just sitting there and you're like, at the end of it, you're like, that out of all the things in the hour that I could have said that could have gone wrong, the very thing that might have this person never come back is the way I reacted to a simple hug, you know?
Exactly. Exactly. Like therapists give the worst hugs.
Yes.
Like it's,
Yeah.
it's not a genuine hug.
Well, Lauren, I just want to say thank you for coming. And I, with you, it's always easy to just get into different things and have interesting conversations. But I appreciate your insight, and I know we've been talking with a few people through the last few weeks, like Laura Deneen and other people who have brought you up and who think so highly of you in town. And so I just we're grateful to have your voice be a part of things always, and you are always welcome over here. But thanks for joining us today.
Thanks
I
for
think
having
students are probably sick of hearing Belmont people doing all our videos, so it's great to have someone who's outside of there. So so thank you for being a part of things, and we'll talk to you soon, and take care of yourself.
Sounds good. You too.